and go. Hi, everyone. Nice to be with you again in another episode for Global Connections. This time we have Marina Tribble with us. She's Marketing Operations Director for Global and US for SI Pharmaceutical. Thank you very much to be with us, Marina.
Oh, thank you, Mario. Thank you for the invitation. And it's a pleasure to be here today.
Thank you. So now, before we start, introducing Marina Tribble, we're going to mention to you all that we are within Global Connections professional educational program. Don't forget to go to our link below and subscribe so you receive notifications for the next episodes. We have been inviting very important VIP people that are really knowledgeable and savvy in business. So it's really nice to have them here, and they are sharing voluntarily their knowledge with us. Thank you very much again for all of you that have built on our knowledge. Thank you very much. So the main sponsor here is Netwire Global. Netwire is a company that handles solutions for content projects, corporate content projects, international content corporate projects. So thank you, Netwire, for being our sponsor in this program. Now, I want to introduce you, Marina Tribble, once again. Marina is a marketing and sales professional with experience in both retail and pharmaceutical industries, a strong back record of achievement in global product launches, including USA and emerging markets, passionate about problem solving, developing teams, and working in cross functional projects. So it's a pleasure to be with you today, Marina. It will be a conversation, it will be a podcast for our audience that are here. So if anybody has a question, feel free to send. We'll try to deliver most of them to our speaker here today. So feel free. We are broadcasting on uh, LinkedIn as well as in YouTube. So, Marina, once again, thank you. And I'm handing over uh,
Thank
for
you,
you.
Mario. Um, it does it looks that I have done a lot when you start talking about about my career. I didn't thought about everything that I have been part of. So yes, I'm very excited to say that I started my career, 20 years ago after college, and I worked in advertising agencies. So I was in a very different side in the beginning of my career. And then I moved to the retail industry, and it wasn't until I would say 12 years ago that I moved to pharma. So I think today I can share a little bit about different industries, but most part of my career I have spent in pharma, as you know, and the audience probably doesn't know, but we know each other for, I guess, a long time.
Yeah.
um, it's very funny because without knowing, right, it's a very small world, but I worked with your brother before, and we almost worked together in the same
Yes.
company. So it's funny how, it
I think,
seems a really big world out there,
yeah.
but in the end of the day, I think the Brazilians do cross paths at some point. So thanks
Yes,
again
yes.
for having me.
Thank you very much. Yeah, you brought something that probably I would mention in some point, but it's a highly coincident that it's a big coincidence that we have met again because we had opportunity to meet in a Johnson and Johnson
Yeah, a
event
decade ago. Yeah, it
a
was more
decade ago. I
than
think it was
yeah,
2013, right?
yeah, 10 years ago, exactly.
10 years ago. And then by coincidence, I was selecting some executives from pharma, some from agribusiness, and some other industry. And then I connect to you, invite you to be here with us today.
Yeah,
So it was a coincidence. We were together in Orlando, Florida,
yes,
in
yep,
the event, and we
yep.
there. And when I invite you, when I invite you, we had our first meeting to be here today. We're oh my gosh, you are in Invitational. It is the name of,
Yes. Yeah.
and then we found out that we had met 10 years ago.
Exactly. I thought that was a big coincidence. That was funny.
Well,
So I feel like I am sitting on a bar talking with you, so I feel very comfortable, and I think this is going to go very well. So,
yeah, definitely. So I want to make you. I want to ask you the first question. I have a few questions here, and I hope for the audience will be fun. And my first question is about how you handle the creation of strategy, take into consideration the internal and external stakeholders, meaning the customers and your team. What are the methodologies and the pathway that you follow to create an engaging and effective winning strategy?
yeah, I think, I love this topic because I think strategy is an extremely collaborative process. And I say process because also sometimes it's not a straight line. You go through different stages. For example, you can do market research if you don't understand your audience. And then you have to go back and adjust your assumptions and adjust your strategy. So it's not a very linear process, and you need to be comfortable with that, right? You need to be comfortable that sometimes you're going to step back to step forward. Um, and I am very passionate about strategic processes. I will focus on what I do these days. So, a lot of the strategy in pharma starts understanding the disease that you are playing and what are the current unmet needs in the market that your product can address. So a lot of what I do in pharma actually starts with the scientific community and what are the scientific leaders telling us that they need. And then, of course, looking inside the company, how your product or your portfolio is going to address that need. So strategy development in pharma, of course, it depends on what you want, but it's mostly, and the most important thing is what are the patients in need? What are the providers looking for? So you can meet halfway and address those. So for pharma internal process, I would say cross-functional teams is a big part of what we do. So engaging your clinical team to understand the clinical trials and what happened during the trials. I think it's always a good idea of what happened on the market once you launch. For example, let's say one of the trials for the product had some delays because the doctors couldn't find the appropriate patients, right? So patient identification could be one thing that you might need to solve in order to succeed and have uptake in the market.
And you
Um,
mentioned one thing in your talk that is funny. I don't know if the right word is funny, but it's intriguing. That is, most of the industries, when the scientists and the engineers they start developing a product, it is designed and from the beginning to the end. What I mean is, in pharma, many times you are researching for a medicine, for a drug, and then you find a side effect that brings a benefit to the population, and then you launch it with a different uh, end. What I mean is, like, Viagra was a big an example of side effect that was initially researched for high blood pressure, and then they find another application. Sibutramine was another one, and many others medicines were discovered like this. So it's very interesting that in pharma we depend a lot on the researchers, on the physicians,
Yeah.
on the scientific community to bring new medicine, and the science is definitely a must on everything we do in the segment.
Yeah.
Is that correct? You would
Yeah.
agree or
Oh,
change
yeah.
anything on my
No,
statement?
no, I was just gonna reinforce that the strategy in pharma it depends a lot on the science. So it's very science driven. You cannot want to do things that the science doesn't prove that you can. So that's definitely one of the main drivers for a strategy development in pharma is the science, and also the input of the cross-functional team of not only what is the science telling you, but what can the science tell you in the future. So life cycle management and strategy for different lines of therapy can also be different, depends on this the scientific and what the scientific community tells you. So what I have done in the past for pharma is advisory boards with patients, advisory boards with physicians, round table discussions with advocacy group. So these are all tools that you can use in order to gain insights that will shape your strategy. Because in the end of the day, strategy is about choices, and it's not and it has to be very focused. The reason I say that is because right now we are living in a world with so much information, right? People are bombarded with information. If you are online or not, the volume of information is huge. So if your strategy is not very focused, you're just going to be noise out there. So you need to think about what are the two or three things that you must do in order to succeed for that product. So, what is the strategy that will drive those key activities in order to avoid the content chaos, right? You don't want to be in a situation where you have so much content that your execution, your field team, your sales team, it's just lost because of the volume of information. So I would I would be very careful, especially on messaging development, on how big do you want your message platform to be, because
Okay.
the reality is sometimes you have 30 seconds with the customers, right? You have like a
Yep.
minute. What are you going to say?
Yeah.
It's definitely not a 50 or 20 page promotional material. It's like one thing.
And talking about take advantage that you mentioned the amount of information that we have, and that makes our life very difficult to make decisions and decide the pathways that will make us succeed. So talking about this, how do you leverage market intelligence to support your strategic decision making?
Yes.
How can marketing sites guide your strategy direction?
Yeah, so there are a few ways to uh, use business intelligence. One of the ways is understanding the competitive landscape. So, as you know, before you create or you launch a product, you need to identify what will be your positioning. So, in the minds of your customer, where is that unique place that you want your product to own, and so your customers understand what do you stand for. And to develop the positioning, you need to do competitive assessment. So business intelligence and understanding what are the other products that might come to the market, or the current positioning for the products that are already on the market. This exercise, again, it's an exercise that can take time, depends on the number of competitors you want to prioritize for the main competition. But it's a very, very valuable exercise, because once you are out of the competitive workshop, you know exactly what is the empty space in the market that you can occupy. And this is huge, because then everything you do, your positioning statement, the messaging that will support your positioning, everything comes after that. So that's how I see business intelligence being used. And then once you identify the positioning territories that you can play that will make you successful, then it's time to test those with market research. So usually, it's a combination of what is the competitive intelligence telling you, and then you create your positioning territories. You test those territories with market research. And the market research, it's important to have um, the customers that you are targeting, right? So you need to be really clear on what is that screening, what kind of people you want to answer that research, because it needs to be the audience that you want to target. And then once you have that validated, well, then it's the insights that will give you the answers on where do you want to go, and what are the territories that you want to achieve. I also want to say that it's important that positioning is not something you will communicate, right? Positioning is what you want. Where do you want to play in the minds of your customers? Messaging is what you're going to communicate. So those are two different things that I want to make that distinction. I can't hear you. Are you let me see. Are you on mute?
Yes,
Can
I
you hear?
was. Thank you
Okay.
very much.
Okay, good. I was like,
And I
am I on
really
mute?
I really like the way you said like how you differentiate positioning and messaging. And but how you translate the strategy whenever you find the place that you want to play, and how who is your customer, which we identified before you went to the market because you did market research on that target audience, and then you heard and you define which is the specialty that you want to play because you define the disease that you will benefit
Yes.
from that medicine.
Yeah.
And then you create a strategy, you find the way you are going to differentiate this medicine and everything. How do you see you translating all this strategy into messaging, not only to marketing collaterals and all the channels that you use within marketing, but also for sales, which is a little bit different? How do you handle
Yeah.
the translation of the strategy and the messaging that will be connected to your positioning to make sure that it will resonate uh, the messages within marketing and sales activities?
Yeah. I think the short answer is the simpler, the better, right? As you know, the sales team has a lot of information on the field. So it's important for them to be focused on what are the key things you want to be able to communicate. One best practice that I had is to include part or some key people from the sales team into the workshops for positioning development, message testing. So having someone from the field that can bring that customer perspective, right? That fresh customer perspective, I think it's really important from an execution point of view, because you don't want to create something that is just difficult to execute, or that maybe you heard in market research that might work, but sometimes how many doctors you have on a market research, you might have 20, 30. It's not the whole universe, right? And depending on if it's qualitative or quantitative, of course, the number of responders are different. But having someone from the field part of the process, I think it really helps translate, because then in their own terms, they can tell you how that will resonate better with the customers. But as you know, we live in a very highly regulated environment in pharma, and it's for the good, right? So everything we say, it's highly regulated, and we have like very strict rules on how we can promote products in pharma. So it's not whatever we want to say it, right? It needs to be based on the science. It needs to have data that supports the claims. You need to have strong references. And when I say references here, especially in pharma, I'm talking about publications, right? Data that has been peer reviewed. So pharma is very unique in that sense that it's not very easy to translate, because there are a lot of things that you can say, even if you want, even if you have data, because there are regulations in place. So, and I partner with your legal team internally or compliance team. So I have been blessed to have cross-functional partners in my career that really helped me in that process, and very early on looping them in and making them part of the process will avoid bumps down the road, because if everybody understands what the team is trying to accomplish very early, they can provide you on the how, like how do you get there, from in a compliant way, which is something very important in pharma.
Thank you very much. I want to hear from you how you're handling the digital transformation that we are facing. We create the messaging, we create the strategy, we do all this work, and then comes the pandemic. And I never thought in my life I could see an MRI, for example, a CT being sold on by internet. I thought this was impossible because physicians want to see the machines, the medical device. I worked for some years on medical device as well, in pharma and medical device, and I thought it was impossible to have like a training. It's almost impossible to have. I thought it was impossible to have a procedure training for a physician. They need a cadaver. They needed some simulators at least.
Yeah.
And nowadays we are in a huge digital transformation where we have metaverse, we have artificial intelligence, we have chatbots. And sounds that you, in our conversation early, you mentioned that you have handled some of the artificial intelligence chatbots. Do you want to elaborate a little bit for us on how you are handling this digital transformation to
Yeah.
messaging, to reach customer, and to lead with all everything that you have faced?
I think it's a very exciting time for marketing to use technology. We call MarTech, right? Marketing technologies, because there's so many of them right now. You mentioned chatbots. So again, chatbot is a great way to talk with your customers in a new channel when your customers want, and delivering the message that they are looking for, right? So instead of having your traditional sales team coming in to a clinic or to physician's office to explain about your product, this is your customer coming to your environment, usually in a website, or if you have a QR code, you can start a conversation on another platform, such as WhatsApp. So in my case, what we did, it was we launched on the product website. And it was a great opportunity to open a new channel during the pandemic, where we were having a lot of problems accessing the doctors. Of course, the hospitals, the clinics, everything was closed.
It was a e-commerce.
It was no, it wasn't e-commerce. It was just communication, and any kind of requests that the
Oh,
customers
okay.
had. They could go to the website, and then we had the virtual assistant pop up and say, "How can I help
Mhm.
you?" I'm sure you have seen these kind
Uh,
of virtual assistants.
yeah,
So that was
it was
something.
more a chat bot for frequent ask, well, like
Yes.
frequent ask questions type of thing.
Exactly. So for example, in this specific case, because we couldn't access the providers, because we couldn't visit them, right? A lot of the hospitals there were very strict entrance because of the COVID pandemic. So we couldn't visit them in the way we used to, but we want to make sure they had the information they wanted from our products. So we open up this new channel, this virtual assistant, and it worked really well. At least we had a satisfaction survey. The survey went very positive. So the doctors were getting what they were looking for. So I think the digital transformation has so many different arms in marketing. So one is optimizing your omni-channel capabilities. So how do you integrate face-to-face interactions with digital interactions? So marketing automations that can consolidate the data and really help you understand where in the sales funnel or in the customer journey is the information relevant for your customers. So I think that that data, the amount of data that you can collect, of course, depending on where you are in the world, we know that sometimes in US you can collect data and it's very different than in the European environment, where you have very strict um, privacy regulations. I think it depends on what's possible, depends on where you are in the world, but I feel like the omni-channel capabilities has increased so much after the pandemic, because we need it, because the digital channels just became so important. I remember when I joined pharma in US, my first job was, they called that time, non-personal promotion, and
Oh.
my budget was very tiny, and basically I was trying to figure out what that job was, like non-personal promotion. Well, basically that was digital, but at that time we didn't use digital. We say non-personal, meaning you are not going to send your sales team to visit this doctor. These were probably like tier 3 or 4, and you will only communicate with them digitally because it was more cost effective. Well, things change a lot since that time. And basically, you communicate in the digital space with every customer now. And of course, depending on where you want to, what your content, sometimes face to face is more relevant than digitally, but those are completely integrated into your omni channel. So digital transformation can help that optimization of content, when and where you should deliver the content in order to move your customer along the funnel and increase your chances of use or trial or conversion, whatever you are trying to achieve for that specifically campaign. Um, but also, as I said about the chatbot, creating new channels. A chatbot is a completely new channel. And then last but not least, from content development for strategy and execution, I have seen very excited way to validate your messaging or the lexicon that you use in your messaging using artificial intelligence. So how do you query a really big data set to tell you what words are going to resonate with the customer, what sentences you should avoid, right? What are the things that it makes conversion more difficult or easier depending on your audience. So there are some artificial intelligence models these days that can give you answers on how do you tailor your messages that will increase chances of success. So
And talking about artificial intelligence, in the past I used to call, I don't know if in English will resonate well, but I used to call office marketing managers, like office marketing professionals. So which I mean, what I meant is people that create things just inside of the office. And you well mentioned that you have to connect to customer, and sometimes you have to, the marketeers, the product managers, the middle level management, especially the middle, not only the middle level management, but all the management hierarchy in my philosophy should go to the field and see with their own eyes and learn from themselves the reality of the field, right? But with the artificial, how I can connect these two things is artificial intelligence sometimes can be very productive and very good used, properly used in creating content, but sometimes people feel really comfortable creating content through artificial intelligence, which is amazing. Do you
yeah,
see any pros and cons on the usage of artificial intelligence for those marketeers that should sometimes go in the field? And many people is home based, home office, home based. We are a company NetWire, home first, so we are remotely based. So how do you see the pros and cons on having access to many information, artificial intelligence? What are the
yeah.
pros and cons?
I think we need to use the technology in our favor, right? So we can't ignore that. We need to adopt. But pharmaceutical industry is a business that relies a lot on your reputation. And how do you build reputation if you are not meeting and establishing relationships with your customers, right? It's really hard to just trust a chatbot, right? Like, who is behind that? Yeah, it's nice to have a new channel to talk with your customers, but you can't trust everything that a chatbot. Like, if you have a person, that is your established relationship, that's the person you trust. So I think in pharmaceutical, the technology will not replace the people, because we are in the business of reputation and relationships. And the people and the companies that will differentiate is the people that have strong connections with your customers. So you have a very straight line, and customers that you can trust, that will give you candid feedback. Yes, this is a good strategy. No, this is not a good strategy. And having that kind of relationship these days is priceless. So I think at least for pharma, I don't see the technology replacing people. I feel that the technology will allow us to be better, but establishing long-term relationships is still the most important thing.
And I have a audience question. Thank you, Venkat Hamashinan. I'm sorry if I'm not pronouncing well your name, but thank you very much, Venkat, for your question. He's asking, how do you anticipate incorporating AI in strategic planning and messaging?
Mm, it's a very good point. I I have seen two ways. One is generating potential messages that then you can put on market research and validate. So never something that you would just take completely out of, I don't know, chat GBT and just use that, right? Of course, you need to validate in market research, but it can speed up that process. And instead of, let's say you have a new agency and you are still onboarding your agency, why not use the power of a very large database and artificial intelligence to help you draft some messages that you can then put into market research? So I feel like that can speed up the process. It can never replace, because once you bring messaging to market research, then in pharma starts the fun process of making that message something that you can use externally. And then we need the expertise of our cross-functional partners, the legal team, the compliance team, the regulatory team, that will look at those messages and say, okay, this is appropriate or this is not appropriate, and basically protect us to communicate something that will benefit, um, not just our direct audience with information and education about the products, but ultimately the patients that can benefit from a new product or a new technology. So I see AI as helping us speed up the process, not replacing anything in pharma.
Okay, thank you very much. And Venkat, thank you very much for your question. I have one specific question regarding the handling of content. You are responsible for the globe. You are marketing director for the globe. So, how do you see the challenge of internationalization of content? What I mean is what is the challenge in translation the message and resonate the proper message to different countries, different cultures? It is a challenge, and we NetWire we do a lot of we call transcreation, because it's not a translation. It's not, you cannot fix your attention only on the source, on the words, but understand the message in different countries. How you handle this challenge of internationalizing the content and the messaging to all the globe?
Yeah. So there are, as you mentioned, NetWire is one of them. There are vendors that can support you in this process. From a brand name, so from a product name perspective, in pharma, usually always the products have the brand name and then the generic name, right? The generic name is given by the World Health Organization, so we don't have control of what the generic name and it will be, and that is something that it's global. When you get that, that's international. What's going to be in every single country your generic name. The brand name is different. The brand name is something that the process can take quite a long time, and I'm telling you, sometimes years. because you do need to go through a very thorough legal review to make sure that word doesn't mean anything that you don't want, or if there are already other brands registered in the countries. So, brand name is something very complex because you really need a very robust legal review. In the case of strategies and messaging, I think you need to be culturally aware, and what moves the needle in US might not be the same that moves the needle in EU, right? Sometimes your audience might be looking more at the efficacy, sometimes they might be looking at quality of life. It depends on the specialty, it depends on how the culture of that country is. So that's why I feel having very strong regional partners or market leaders that can give you that insight very early on, it will be extremely helpful. I think you also need to be aware about colors, right? So, um, for example, you might think green can be a good color to use globally, but in maybe in a country, white means purity, so it's more appealing for a pharmaceutical. Could the color of the pill. Sometimes the color of the pill is something that we don't pay much attention, but it might make a big difference because in some cultures the color of things are very important. So having those relationships internally with your regional counterparts, it will help you it translate. And we have seen cases of different products having different positioning. Um, One that I can tell that it's really funny is Applebee's, for example, the restaurant in United States is considered a chain, right? You see everywhere here. Applebee's is sort of like a low cost dinner option for the family. But if you go to Brazil, for example, it's extremely expensive. Like Applebee's, it's like a very expensive and it's a fancy restaurant. So I feel like it sometimes, and it's not right or wrong. It's just like, what do we want to achieve? And if that country has a very specific culture for food, in this case, you need to adapt and adjust. So global positioning sometimes is what we strive, right? You want to make sure the customers can have a consistent experience with your brand, but I think you need to be aware that sometimes local adaptation is needed um, in order to achieve the success in that country. Did I think you froze? Can you hear me?
Now,
Okay, you're there.
yes,
Okay, good,
I'm here.
good.
So thank you very much, and I think it's amazing the examples that you mentioned. Like the color of the pill makes a lot of difference. You have to take care of the color, and many times don't doesn't matter. This is the type of information that the any vendor will know. So you mentioned a good vendor is really important, but there are some subtleties that depends on you to give the briefing, the appropriate briefing to
Yes.
the vendor, and
Yep.
also involve people from other countries in the
Mhm,
process of
mhm.
uh, translating. What I call translating is not just translating, but uh, sending the message and help involve many people to adapt the message to each country. And again, to what you start the live today saying, the importance of involving and engaging all the stakeholders to create
Yeah.
the strategy from the beginning to the end of the process, all the time, talking to people and involving people is really important to take into consideration. Details such as the color of the pill
Yeah.
that can make a big, a huge difference in a country. I have gone through a case while I was working pharmaceutical that we made a mistake. We used the same color as aspirin. Aspirin is one of the most famous medicine in the world, and we used the aspirin color to a product that is gonna be used together with aspirin, and we put the same color as aspirin, and the customer got confused which
Yes.
one he took because it's
Yeah.
like senior people taking the medicine, and
Yes.
you have to take care what is the color of the medicine that they're taking.
Yes.
You're launching a new one that is the same color as they take every day,
Yeah.
all the time, so you're gonna get make them confused. So this subtleties is really important for the companies to take care as much as they take with the, not only with the strategy but also with the translation to other countries of the messaging. So really
Exactly.
good point, really
Yeah,
good
I
point.
think it is understanding the patient journey in this case, right? What are the pain points of the journey? Where can you really make a difference to improve that journey so that will become your leverage points? I think it's a very it's a very important process to identify what
Yeah.
needs to be done.
To your example, Venkat mentioned here that maybe in US Westing hotels are, and some other brands are not, maybe not 5 stars, but in India they are 5 star. Is
Yes,
like the same example. Thank you, Venkat, for your
exactly.
example, and
Yeah,
we have to take that all of this into consideration.
yeah, exactly. And it did happen with me. I made reservations at the Westin and I was expecting a 5 star because in Brazil, they are very fancy. I think in the Caribbean as well. But then I got there and it was like a business hotel and I was like, okay, so that's not where I want to spend my vacation. That is a great example of,
Yeah.
how sometimes you have different positioning depending on where you are.
Okay, so wrapping up the our live here. Thank you. I want to say thank you very much, Marina, for your
Oh, thank
time.
you, Mario.
I
Thank you so
know
much.
life is busy, and for you, it's all the time leading with the whole world. Thank you very much. Thank you for your time, and thank you for bringing us very good knowledge on how you lead with the strategy and how you're leading with the new technologies and methodologies to engage your internal team and how to engage your customers, especially patients. That is a very sensitive, very important matter for everybody. Thank you very much. Thank you for the audience.
Thank
But
you.
I want to listen your final words before I
Well,
finalize here.
thank you for inviting me. It has been an honor sharing some of my thoughts today. I'm glad my kids are quiet and they didn't came in running around. I was a little worried because at this time they are already home, but I think everything worked well. Thank you so much for having me. I look forward to seeing you.
Thank you very much, Marin. It was a pleasure interacting with you again. Thank you for the audience. Don't forget to access the link below and subscribe for Global Connections. It's a great program to listen to people like Marina and other business savvy executives in this corporate world. Don't miss. The next one will be in 2 weeks. Don't miss it. Thank you very much, and have a great evening, great day for all people around the globe. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye, guys. Thanks.
Thank you.